laptops, but it's that idea of inflation pulls forward spending, right?
Yeah.
Because you're worried that it's going to be more expensive later. And when I saw that announcement, I had done that almost a year ago. I was like, I know I'm kind of needing to, I'm going to just do this before things get worse. But I do think that whether or not that pulls forward too much and then you get a backlash to that is something that remains to be seen. But that higher end consumer is driving most of the consumer spending, and that higher end consumer is doing fairly well.
We have another headline, which is SpaceX set to wipe $1 trillion from their peak value, about a 40% drop. A lot of headlines because you were here on set with us, Sarah. Maybe just very briefly for 1 minute, or even less. Talk to us about the M&A, the IPO pipeline. I mean, we have Anthropic waiting in the wings and maybe OpenAI, and these are valued very, very richly. Is that evidently going to bite us afterwards?
Well, so this is a different cycle. We haven't had an IPO cycle in a long time. There are a lot of companies that didn't go public in the way that most of us who have been around for longer than we'd like to admit took the time to go public or came public earlier. So there is this whole question about what does that mean for valuations and what does that mean for the market. The fact that we haven't had an IPO cycle in a long time also says that we've had a lot of money that has been concentrated as companies, buy each other and buy back their shares. So maybe the market does need some new blood in there in terms of the IPO. The question is those valuations and that richness. And a lot of that is predicated on things that we can't quite linearly extrapolate at this moment, but there's an awful lot of excitement about it. So there is a push-pull to that, and I think that you saw that with SpaceX, and it's also like they're not putting all that supply out on the market at once. So the question is the scarcity factor enough for investors to keep chasing that? And the answer is we are waiting to see how that plays out in the next few months and the next year. I think there's a lot that's going on that's very exciting. I think investors get excited by that, but there's also a question, to your point, of how much of that valuation is already in there before they even go public.
Yeah, all right. Well, Sarah, it's been a morning. Thank you so much. Good luck with your Friday trading. That is Sarah Hunt of Alpine Woods. Let's get a check on the stock market right now, because it's going to be a deep red day. It feels like about half and half in terms of higher and lower, but the ones that are lower in terms of stocks are potentially the most important ones when it comes to the weighting in the index, right? So you have all of the semiconductors, and 28 out of 30 in the Philly Semiconductor Index are lower right now, and the ones that are higher are just barely holding on to gains. And you have all of the mags, 7, you have just tech in general, with the exception of Apple, as we were talking about a moment ago, performing badly. Here on the other side, you have some consumer staples, for example, Walmart. You have some of the oil companies on higher oil, ExxonMobil, and so on. Some of the health insurers and biotech stocks, United Health and Eli Lilly, with a little bit of a halo effect after earnings. And then obviously some of the companies that didn't suffer from the problems that we saw Taco Bell suffer from are also higher today, and they make up some of the 284 companies right now that are higher in the S&P 500. But if you look at sectors, it's probably more obvious, because we do have all of the chip-related tech sectors all lower. Financials index actually getting some back this week after some great earnings. And then outperforming, you have energy and consumer staples, utilities, healthcare, all of the ones that benefit from higher oil prices, and perhaps a consumer that's hanging in there just a little bit better than we expected. All right, coming up, Cities, Jason Bazinet talks about the disappointing outlook for Netflix amid a major shift in the media landscape. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Hello, my name is DrPaulCottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble, on YouTube, and my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. We still have the problems with the smoke coming from Canada. That's affecting the Midwest, New England, going all the way down below New York and Washington, D.C. So if you are in these smoke zones, please take my advice. Make sure that you get the structural nanosilver lozenges. These lozenges will help to create the secretions and protect your oral pharynx so you don't get that throat irritation. Super important. And it will help to neutralize. By protecting your oral pharynx, you're going to be able to prevent or at least mitigate irritation and upper respiratory issues because of this smoke that's taking place. You can get the Manuka honey lozenges or the orange splash. Get a few bags for your household. We don't know how long this smoke issue coming from Canada will last, but take my advice. Make sure that if you're outside, that you have these lozenges to to create the secretions to protect that oral pharynx. I also recommend getting the Cleanse or the Max 35. And what you do is you take a teaspoon and take a teaspoon of this each day, swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 or 30 seconds that help protect that oral pharynx. Super important. And you can do this daily. I do this daily to help boost up my innate immune system. But because of the particulate matter in the air, you want to protect that oral pharynx so it doesn't cause irritation and cause disruption within that epithelial lining. Super important. Pay attention to me. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. Share the links and ask your social media to follow me so I can grow the channel and reach a larger audience. The S&P 500 is down. It's at 7,437. It's a big drop. So we're down for the day right now. And the VIX index has spiked up to 19. So it's below 20. It's still relatively calm. It's not crazy. But we have to keep in mind we have problems with the tech sector right now. AI bubble most likely is bursting. People are starting to talk, and I have been, but people are talking on their podcasts on how the business models for OpenAI and Anthropic are not sustainable. We have oil that went up today. It went as high as $81. Right now it's trading at $80.80 at the moment for WTI. Bitcoin is trading down. It's at 62,670. So 62,670. Euro is trading at 114 stable. Japanese yen trading at 162.35 stable. The natural gas is trading at 2.897. Gush has been climbing in the session because of oil being up, and that's now trading at 37.13. I'm longing oil right now. I'm longing Gush. I have a hedge strategy for natural gas where I'm longing and shorting. So with that, let's continue with Bloomberg.
SBC, of course, the firm saying Apple has a stronger product lineup coming and better AI tools. And finally, a down day for Netflix, down almost 10% now after a weak third quarter guidance overshadowed an inline quarter. Jeffrey is saying today the report strengthens the bear case as growth and engagement slow. Evercore ISI pointing to softer revenue and profit guidance. Piper Sandler saying investors are focused on slowing growth. Isabel.
Let's discuss Netflix further with Citi Media and Entertainment Research Analyst Jason Bazinet. He has a buy rating with a $100 price target on the stock. Jason, thank you for joining us. It's really a great day to talk about Netflix, but maybe not so much with the stock down. But do you think that Netflix still has major growth runway, or maybe are the easy days of gains behind Netflix?
Well, the bears are certainly in charge, and when we speak to institutional investors, they want to put sort of a traditional, PE multiple on this, something in the low teens, and that seems to be the direction of travel. What I suggest to clients is there's quite a few levers that Netflix has at their disposal that are sort of underappreciated. The company talked about in their public call about new high-end tiers, new low-end tiers. So I could imagine things like paying extra to binge watch, right, and not giving that to every consumer for free, charging premiums for early access to their films. And so there are absolutely levers that they have at their disposal. Is the growth going to re-accelerate? I don't think so, but can it stay in this, double-digit range for a number of years? I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a great point. I think a lot of people would pay a little extra to be able to binge watch, or just, they would tell themselves they wouldn't do it, but just to have the option there, right? So,
That's
right. Obviously these are things that the company is thinking about. It's implemented so many new things. Why would it have a problem implementing these new things, Jason? Why are investors losing confidence?
Well, on this particular quarter, I think they lost confidence because Netflix has very carefully trained the buy side to sort of follow this simple algorithm, which is Netflix spends money on content, they drive engagement, that engagement allows them to ask for permission to take a price hike. And so what the buy side is looking at is the engagement numbers are falling, and so that makes investors very nervous that they're not going to be able to get pricing. That's sort of the soft hypothesis. What happened in the quarter that they just reported is in the United States, they announced a price hike that took effect in the second quarter, but the US and Canada's division of Netflix missed street estimates. And so what investors think is, oh, they took the price hike, but because the engagement is down, they must have lost subs. Now the company says that's not true, but it was a tactical data point that fed into that buy side narrative, and that's why you're seeing downside performance in the stock today.
What about other initiatives of Netflix? Do you think live sports, podcasts, or even ads can become meaningful growth drivers? And if so, by how much?
Yeah, so I mean, we've argued for a number of years that the direction of travel, if you look more broadly in the entertainment landscape, is what I call open platforms. That is content that is not curated by some sort of expert. And so what does that mean? In the video world, it means YouTube grows faster than Netflix. It means in the publishing world, Substack grows faster than a lot of other publishers. And you can just go through the list of any sort of media vertical. It's the same pattern. Open beats closed. This is probably one reason why there is this visceral reaction to Netflix trying to go out and buy traditional media, because much like generals are often accused of preparing their battle plan to win the last war, the future direction of travel may be more around user-generated content. Netflix used to sort of scoff at this notion 2 years ago. They clearly have made some JVs where they're bringing in more podcast content and more content from content creators. And I think they just need to go in that direction, but probably go faster than what's been announced so far.
Yeah, I mean, it lost out most recently on Roku. Are there any other assets like that it might pursue again? Or were these two particular assets that they wanted, and if they weren't available, it's not that they're just going to acquire for acquiring's sake?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of potentially traditional media assets that they could buy. The one investors are talking about now is NBC Universal, which is getting spun off from Comcast in about a year. I think what would be more intelligent for Netflix to do is not to go back and try and buy IP or buy a traditional film and TV studio. The direction of travel should be, if Netflix goes out and makes some documentary about some crime that occurred, maybe give that content earlier, like a sneak peek, to content creators that will go do things on YouTube, right? And then put that user-generated content next to Netflix early, right? And then allow the consumer to go in and watch the Netflix show. But if they want to go deeper, not pop out of the app and go to YouTube, stay inside the Netflix app and sort of watch user-generated content that's been created around something that Netflix has built. So this is a strategic, I think, shift that Netflix needs to go through. And then it's not necessarily required. It doesn't necessarily require M&A. What it requires is just a reorientation of how they spend their content spending to lean more into content creators.
Yeah, capture and keep. Yeah, exactly. Jason,
yeah.
Thank you so much. City Media and Entertainment Research Analyst Jason Mazaneda. Coming up, South Korea changing the rules on leveraged ETFs to help curb market volatility. We will break down details. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Bringing you up to the minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Ann Riverdure in Beijing, China, and this is Bloomberg.
We're at the epicenter of a global realignment on a scale not seen for decades. At the intersection between markets, economics, and geopolitics, a forum for sophisticated conversation. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Every weekday, Bloomberg puts a spotlight on a different aspect of global finance. Flows, funds, and the forces shaping markets on ETF IQ. The future of money with Bloomberg Crypto. The players behind major transactions on Bloomberg Deals. rates, risk, and the cost of capital on Bloomberg Real Yield, and personal finance, retirement, and wealth management on Bloomberg Money. A different topic every weekday, only on Bloomberg Television.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Open Interest. You're looking at a screen behind me that is going to be red because we're seeing a global chip sell-off spilling over U.S. equities. We have traders really rushing to exit their positions as they exit into these big names that have, yes, powered the bull market higher the past months, but have also become extremely expensive. You're looking at an S&P that's down by more than 1%, or maybe nearly 1%. The Nasdaq 100 down by session lows, down by more than 2%. The Russell is also down, and the Dow Jones is down, and the Philadelphia Semiconductor Index, this is a gauge of chip makers. It's entering what is called a technical bear market. It's down by 20% from its peak in June. So it's really all red in this space for me. A Bank of America fund manager survey this week said that the most crowded trade is, guess what? Long semis. So we're really going to see how the rest of the
we definitely have a sell-off going on in tech. The S&P 500 is down a little bit more than 1%. Nasdaq's down 2.1%. The S&P 500 is at 7,465. I still have a year-end target of 7,800 to maybe even 8,000. VIX is slightly retracing. It's now at 1853. I closed out my position with Gush, and I closed out my position with oil. I'm looking at maybe going back into oil. I'm wondering if maybe 8110 is a little too high, and there might be a little bit of a retracement. So I'm just waiting. If it pops up, I may go back in. I'd prefer a little bit of a retracement and then go back in. But right now, there's movement in oil, and the S&P 500 in the open sold off a decent amount, but it's slowly trying to retrace back. But it's heavily related to these tech stocks. Now, why? Well, what's going on with tech? Well, maybe there was too much of a build out with the hyperscalers and these chip companies like NVIDIA. I think the story with Micron is a little fishy because will you need as much memory if the hyperscalers pull back? Have we built too many server farms for AI? The actual business model for OpenAI and Anthropic is questionable. OpenAI decided not to do an IPO. So there's a lot of things going on with the whole AI build out that are questionable. Oracle is having a problem. They're heavily in debt now because of this build out. How sustainable is it? This is part of the reason why investors are like going, well, you know what? This may be the end of the whole chip and AI trade. Cash is king. But the movements today seem to be tied to oil up, equities down, at least right now.
Down and invest in that stock.
Before we continue with Bloomberg, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the magnesium and zinc. This will help to boost up your immune system and help with your brain function. Vitamin C, magnesium, helps with skin health, boosts up your immune system, and helps with brain function. You can take them together or you can take them separately. But please go to my store and get these and help with your brain function. It's really important. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It helps support the work that I do. It helps support your health. And these are supplements that I take every day to help slow down the aging process. It works. Just do what I'm doing. And I'm telling you how I'm making money in the market, and it doesn't take that long. If the market's only been open for less than 30 minutes, and I already closed 2 positions profitably.
Thank you so much for joining, and do tune in to ETF IQ on Mondays at 12 p.m. New York time. Coming up in the next hour of Open Interest, Joanne Su from University of Michigan walks us through the latest consumer sentiment data.
right, since Bloomberg is on commercial break, let's go to the war that's happening with the United States and Iran.
Overnight, the U.S. launching a new wave of strikes on Iran, destroying military and maritime targets, including a key port tower, as the administration ramps up pressure over the Strait of Hormuz. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt citing Iran's recent attacks as the reason for this very operation.
They were not to fire on commercial vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz. And unfortunately, they have made the tragic decision for them to do that. And President Trump is not going to sit by and allow these active acts of terrorism to take place in the Strait without ensuring Iran pays consequences for that. The president will hold them accountable when they turn their back on the words that they state to the United States, but he is always open to diplomacy at the very same time.
Will Thibault is the director of the American Military Project at Claremont, and he joins me now. Welcome, Warren, too. Great to see you. So gauge for us what took place overnight. These U.S. attacks on infrastructure, roads and bridges leading into the port city of Bandar Abbas. Why were these targets on the U.S. hit list?
Carly, this is part of a deliberate campaign to both punish Iran for violating the terms of the MOU and also set conditions for whatever further military operations may be necessary in the immediate future. This is clearly the infrastructure, the roadways, bridges, some port infrastructure that would be necessary to both sustain combat operations for Iran into the Strait, but also conduct things like resupply. I think we're going to squeeze the neck of Iranian military infrastructure around the Strait of Hormuz so that they're not able to sustain their attacks. And if necessary, give the president options to conduct further military action so we can solve the problem of the openness of the Strait of Hormuz for good. We're not going to be held hostage by Iran going forward.
Okay, so the U.S. is fighting, of course, to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. Iran wants it closed, but now there's also focus on a new waterway. According to Reuters, here's the quote: Iran has asked Yemen's Houthi movement to stand ready to close the Red Sea oil route if the United States strikes Iranian power infrastructure, three sources told Reuters on Thursday, posing a potential new threat to global energy supplies. If this does happen and the Houthis do close the Red Sea port, how significant would that be? How much damage would that do?
It's definitely an issue, Carly. I mean, it would be significant, but I think that kind of puts the cart before the horse because the United States and Saudi Arabia will have a vote here. What's interesting is that Saudi Arabia has already been working ahead of Iranian efforts to try and reinforce Houthi rebels. They've closed airspace to Iranian planes trying to land in the peninsula. And I think the United States and Saudi Arabia aren't going to sit idly by while the Houthis try and influence, this critical juncture of maritime traffic. So it's clearly a tenuous time, but what is unique is that the United States is enforcing its foreign policy. This is not necessarily a failure of the MOU. This is the United States living by the terms of the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran and demonstrating that we will use significant military force if Iran violates the agreement. So in many ways, this is a reasonable outcome from the negotiations that have transpired. I don't think it's an indication that anything has failed or that policies have failed. This is what it means when America justly applies military power in a region that requires a really tense dynamic of diplomacy and force.
Well, the president said that power plants could be targeted next week, so we will certainly be keeping an eye on the Red Sea. Director of the American Military
So you can see that the region is expanding in terms of its operations. The United States will have to attack Yemen, the Houthis. Saudi Arabia attacked just recently one of the airports. So if they block that strait by Yemen, Bab el MIAB or MOB, whatever it's called. We should probably, if they're successful in blocking it, then we should see oil prices start to go much higher. Now, what is interesting here with oils is it's trading at 81.20, and it's above that 79 support level. So we're now going to start seeing probably a trading range of 80 to maybe 85. Now, do I think it's going to go march up to 100 anytime soon? No, I don't think so. Part of the reason is that when a system, a complex system like the markets, or even the human body, but when a system is shocked and it has pain, and then there's some sort of relief, or a system is stressed and there's some sort of relief for 3-4 weeks, and then all of a sudden there's a shock to the system again, sometimes the system has less of a response. The shock to the system is muted. There's almost an immunity to it. Same thing with neurons. If you take a look at neurons, when the neurons are firing, they need to recharge and then fire again. So if they are stimulated, or if the neuron is picking up some sort of sense, it's sensing something. Sometimes if the neuron isn't allowed to recharge, you won't get that communication. Now, these are in milliseconds here, so but the point here is that if a recharge is taking place, the refractory time period is happening in a complex system. You may have less of a response that you had before. And many financial markets are like this. The initial shock, it's bad. You shock the system again, a few weeks later, actually it's muted, usually, unless the shock is even more than the previous shock. But if it's the same or less, it's a muted response. And I think this is what's going to happen with the potential blocking of both straits. Right now, oil is just continually creeping up. Right now, it's at 81.22. Smoke fires are even affecting Pennsylvania right now, so let's listen into that. But before I play the fires from Canada and affecting the Midwest and New England and the East Coast, take my advice, make sure you use the structural nano silver lozenges, the Max 35 or cleanse. This will help to protect your oral pharynx. Super important, because that smoke and the particulate matter, when you're breathing it in, is going to perturb and cause inflammation at the epithelial lining and increase your chances of an upper respiratory infection. So it's very important to pay attention to. Those lozenges will create the secretions to protect the oral pharynx. Max 35 or cleanse, by gargling about 20-30 seconds, will also help to protect that oral pharynx. So the ones that are affected by the fires and this particulate matter, take my advice and use this stuff. Also the gels, lightly coat your nostril to help to collect the dust particles.
You said they'd be ready at 8.
They are ready. It's 8:05.
5 minutes is 5 minutes. Some of us have somewhere to be.
With soaring temperatures, making life miserable for folks. This morning, toxic smoke suffocating a large swath of the country after traveling from the forest fires in Canada, forcing more than 100 million Americans to either mask up or stay inside. Late Thursday, first Detroit, then Chicago clocked the worst air quality in the world.
It's wild, because when you look outside, you think it's fog, and it's completely covered the city, and it's smoke, because when you walk outside, it burns, it stings a little bit.
In response, officials in Chicago closed local beaches. In New York City, public libraries and police precincts handed out free masks.
We're most definitely worried about it because I struggle with, health problems.
The smoke also impacting sports games across the country, including forcing an early start to the Mets-Phillies game in Philadelphia.
Supposed to start this game at 7:10. We've been moved up 1 hour because of the conditions outside.
Over in Chicago, the dangerous smoke forcing an MLS soccer match to be postponed. Similar scenes playing out across Ohio, Minnesota, and Michigan. The haze triggering a code purple in parts of Pennsylvania and Maryland, which indicates very unhealthy air. Making matters worse, a brutal heat wave with soaring temperatures, making life miserable for folks working outdoors in Michigan.
Stay hydrated, listen to AC, take a minute or two, or break in the heat.
Health experts warn the extreme temperatures combined with smoke are a double blow to the body.
Stay indoors, turn on whatever air filtration system you have. What symptoms should people be looking out for? Shortness of breath, chest pain, we see effects all over the body.
And experts say the health impacts from this air are down to particles that are 1/30th the size of a single strand of hair. That is so small they can get into your lungs and into your bloodstream, causing all kinds of problems, which is why health officials say if you are experiencing any symptoms in these conditions, to take those symptoms seriously. Craig?
It's very important to protect that oral pharynx and use that structural nano silver gel and lightly coat your nostrils. And stay away from the outdoors while this smoke is in your area. The particulate matter will disturb that oral pharynx and get into your lungs, create irritation, get into that bloodstream, and that irritation, unfortunately, a lot of people aren't talking about this, but chronic irritation with your lungs will make the blood vessels leaky around the alveoli. So the toxins and inflammation and the pro-inflammatory cytokines, they'll get into the bloodstream and start to disturb the blood-brain barrier. And what will happen is the blood-brain barrier vascular system will start to dilate a little bit, start to become leaky. And when that happens, it gets into your brain, causes inflammation. And if it's chronic, over time, it causes neurons to have problems. Misfolding of proteins, accumulation of plaques, neurons won't connect correctly. So this could also cause problems with the brain. So if it's chronic, it can cause problems with the heart, it can cause problems with breathing, cause vascular issues, blood-brain barrier issues, and if chronic, can cause problems with neural connections. This is the reason why I keep on saying protect your immune system. If you have a good immune system, you'll be able to weather the storm here. But this stuff, if it's chronic, can cause a lot of problems. All right, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you want to concentrate on tasks, if you want to improve the functioning of your brain, if you want to improve your memory, take the Clarity Factor. By taking Clarity Factor, you're going to get rid of that brain fog, you're going to be able to concentrate, and over time, you're going to help to improve those dendritic connections. When you do that, you're going to have better brain function. It's really important to take. It's a great supplement. Take it every day. Some people take it in the morning, others take it in the mid-afternoon. But take it every day. Drink it with filtered water. C60, very powerful antioxidant. This will help to boost up your immune system and your endocrine system, help with your cardiovascular system by reducing the concentrations of oxidized LDL so you have less plaque formation. They'll help your neurons because they'll boost up the energy for your neurons, help the mitochondrial health, bring down inflammation, help to reduce stress of the neuron, and your neurons will be connected better. So you'll think better. It also helps your basal layer for your skin, so you'll look younger. It stacks really well with resveratrol. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It is cheaper per ounce to get the higher ounce configuration. You get an MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, or extra virgin olive oil. C60 has to be in an oil for proper absorption. Preferably take a teaspoon a day on an empty stomach in the morning for best absorption. And by doing this, what's going to happen is you're going to soak up those free radicals and you're going to slow down the aging process. Because what ages you? Free radicals, lower energy, poor mitochondria, and high inflammation. And I keep on hounding everybody. If you keep those controlled, you control your inflammation, control your free radicals, and boost up your energy levels, you will slow down the methylation process of aging. It's that simple. Doesn't have to be complicated. Life doesn't have to be complicated. If you view life in a more minimalistic way, where you don't need a lot of bullshit, and you just simplify, your life will be a lot better. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into you, Mish Dita.
Well, we've seen gas prices come back up. We know the same. We're seeing the same in oil markets more generally. So if gas prices start to climb again, it's very likely these gains will be pared down. But if gas prices start falling again, consumers will start to feel some relief in their budgets, and that will pass through to their views of the economy.
Right, gas prices depending on what happens to oil in the Middle East, and those are unanswerable questions, really, and investors have kind of come to some kind of peace over that. Joanne, before we let you go, talk a little bit about inflation expectations. These are consumer-based measures of where they see inflation headed as opposed to market-based measures, which is what we often talk about. What are you seeing in terms of the outlook for price increases?
So largely speaking, we saw a decrease in short-run inflation expectation from 4.6% last month to 4.2% this month. That's a pretty sizable change, but it's still much higher than what we were seeing in February, let alone what we were seeing in 2024 when inflation had really slowed down from the post-pandemic peak. So consumers are seeing a little bit of relief on their pessimistic views from before. Long-run inflation expectations flat at 3.3, but that also not where we want it to be, still higher than it was before the Iran conflict began.
There's been pretty scant relationship between you, Mitch, and actual spending data. So do you think that we should read this more as vibes than anything else, or do you think that for maybe this time around it'll translate into actual spending?
Well, one of the reasons why we are seeing a bit of difference in terms of spending as well as sentiment, there are a couple of reasons. One is that despite the pain that people feel with high prices, if people feel stable in their incomes, if they are feeling that their wealth is supported by strong stock markets, they are going to be willing to spend through that. So at this point, we have a lot of spending that's coming from upper income, upper wealth people with sizable stock portfolios. And when you look at our data, those are the ones who feel much more positively about the economy. But again, that really depends on those parts of the economy remaining strong to support spending, despite the fact that consumers, by and large, they hate high prices.
Absolutely, and that's something we see over and over again in the data and in earnings as well. Thank you so much, Joanne Shu. She is University of Michigan Surveys of Consumers Director, joining us from Ann Arbor on the U.S. consumer sentiment for July. This is the preliminary release here of the July consumer sentiment, climbing to a 5-month high, big distinction because of lower gas prices. And lower gas prices, especially over the summer, makes a huge difference. Joanne, thank you so much. All right, we have a lot of news on the tech front, Isabel, and it feels like this week we've seen a lot as it relates to Chinese tech as well.
A lot based on that, and overnight there's a Chinese AI startup called Moonshot, which I thought the name was kind of apt. It sent jitters across markets, and this is why partly we're seeing, or largely rather, we're seeing an S&P and the Nasdaq that's down on the day, and that's where you're seeing the stocks on a bear market because of that. And For that, we have no one else better to talk to than Mandeep Singh. He's with Bloomberg Intelligence. Mandeep, do you think this is another DeepSeek moment, or do you think that this is something bigger, changing, maybe, in the AI race?
I would say neither. I'm of the view that, every time there is a new model release, every model provider would highlight, what is unique about this release. And in this case, they talk about, token efficiency, the fact that they have caught up in terms of certain types of functionality that the model can provide. And look, we were in an environment where everyone is talking about how expensive it is to deploy these technologies, the LLMs. And this model seems to be good enough at a low price, which is what is catching attention. But that doesn't mean, they're caught up to the frontier models that Anthropic and OpenAI have released. And so it's really a function of pricing. And to my mind, you can create news, but the actual adoption, we'll have to wait and see.
And it speaks to the nervousness that consumers and investors have over who is prevailing in this AI race. It very much feels like an AI race. Mandeep, why have we gotten to the point where, even though the cutting edge development and technology is happening in the US, it feels increasingly like Asian markets are dictating where things go in terms of price action?
Yes, I think you bring up a very good point that, what's going on in Korea right now seems to be affecting, the indices here and how stocks are trading. And that's part of the nervousness that you alluded to, that, when things go parabolic, as they did with some of the stocks, for no reason whatsoever. Yes, the fundamentals have been great, but that doesn't mean, things have to go up in that fashion. And that's what creates nervousness around valuations. And we are seeing even news like Apple asking, China for qualification of, the US government for qualification of the Chinese memory name, is creating a lot of downside for the US memory names and, your Micron and even SK Hynix. So that's the kind of environment we are in, where any sort of news creates that sort of action where, if stocks were trading at a high valuation, it's going to have an impact. And I think the fundamentals haven't really changed in a big way, which I think will be validated when these companies report their earnings and guide for CapEx, which I expect numbers to go up. But we are in an environment where news will have an impact on day-to-day volatility.
Mandeep, do you think that this is a sign that investors should see this as a threat to US AI leadership, or is it just simply more competition, which is what we should expect anyway?
I think the overall message here is you can't have two companies dominate the LLM race. It's never going to be good from an ecosystem perspective. They will have very high margins, which is definitely not something that all the other companies want in the ecosystem. So there is a desire to have more LLMs and cheaper pricing for these LLMs, and that's why if the option is available through open source Chinese models, people are looking into it now, and it's across the board, and it's no different from any other technology trend. You want to see the cost come down as adoption goes up. That wasn't happening here. And I think that's why you are seeing so much interest in open source LLMs right now.
Okay, so China with DeepSeek and now Moonshot, these developments, when we hear about it, kind of feels like it comes from out of nowhere, mainly because we haven't been following the incremental news on it. Are there other places or other companies that could surprise us in the same way, where suddenly they come out with a fully formed AI model, LLM, that we didn't know about?
Yeah, I mean, look at Meta announcing the Muse models and, trying to become a cloud provider and selling their APIs externally. We've heard about Grok, SpaceX Grok, and now with the merger with Cursor, they have released a new model. So all these could be viable options in terms of using LLMs at a lower token pricing than what the frontier models are currently giving. And so that's where the competition is going to increase. But I go back to that functionality point. All these LLMs are still trailing in terms of the functionality that Fable
or the OpenAI models have. So that gap needs to close, and then people will route the query to the LLM that's most appropriate for that task. And you don't need the frontier LLMs for every query. And I think that's the direction we're headed.
Okay, got it. Thank you for laying that out for us. Mandeep, always a pleasure. Have a great weekend. Mandeep Singh is our global head of tech research. He's resting up because Alphabet reports earnings.
All right, we're going to go to another clip about energy. But let's just do a market recap here. 7,489 for the S&P 500. VIX is at 18. Euro's at 114. Japanese yen's at 162.37. Bitcoin's trading at 63,000. Oil's trading at 80.96. The intraday high was 81.25. So at least in the near term, that's a resistance level. And natural gas is trading at 2.898. Natural gas should be trading at about 2.6. So it's a little bit elevated because of what's happening in the Middle East. And obviously oil should be trading like about $68, $65 a barrel. And so that's also elevated because of the wonderful thing that's happening in the Middle East, unfortunately. All right, so we're going to go to Bloomberg about energy, but before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley will help to bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, and detoxify your body. This is probably really important to take, especially if you're in the zones with the fires, because as people are breathing in this crap, you're going to need to detoxify your body. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the heirloom barley, but this will help with your immune system, your endocrine system, help with joint health, allow you to recover quicker after a workout, and also help with brain function because it keeps the inflammation down and soaks up those free radicals. And detoxifying your body is really important to slow down the aging process. Gladiator barley has all the benefits of heirloom barley, but one extra one helps to build muscle. So if you're an athlete, or if you're older and you have atrophy and you want to build some muscle, take Gladiator barley. And again, this helps to detoxify your body. And by building more muscle, you're increasing your myokines concentrations and BDNF, which are neuroprotective. So yes, by building muscle, you're protecting neurons. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator barley. And if you're an athlete, younger or older, you'll benefit from the Gladiator barley because it'll allow you to recover quicker after your workout, soak up those free radicals that you're producing from a workout, bring down inflammation, and also help to build muscle. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Jeans that don't crush your nuts? Yep, they exist. Introducing the perfect jean. It's got premium stretch fabrics.
I do want to start with sort of what read we should take, if at all, from what is effectively one of the highest crack spreads that we've seen since the mid-'80s, relative to, I guess, the relative fade that we've seen in crude oil futures themselves.
Well, I think when we think about oil, it was impacted by, like I could say, when that MOU came out, it was like popping a pimple. There was oil trapped behind the strait, and it all came out suddenly, like over 120 million barrels. Some estimates put as high as 150 million barrels. That hit crude really hard as it came down, but obviously you can't refine it immediately and put it into products. But at the exact same time, Ukraine started striking deep into Russia, like 1,300 kilometers inside Russia with precision drone strikes that were taking out what we call the CDU, crude oil distillation unit. That's the primary tower. Some of these things are going to take years to rebuild. The damage was so extensive, it's taken out more than 50% of the refining capacity out of Russia. It has led to crude oil shut-in. So not only have we now lost all of the Straits of Hormuz again, we've also lost the crude oil and the refineries in Russia. So the situation in energy, I would argue, is pretty dire. And the other thing I want to point out is that we've exhausted all the insurance policies in round one of the Straits of Hormuz. whether if it is inventory buffers or whether it is China with flexing its economy and able to survive the downturn. So it's a very different situation in this round two than what we saw in round one.
Well, square the circle with me, because I mean, you get this messaging coming from the Trump administration. I understand they're going to talk their side of this story, but they talk about this oil glut and all the tankers out there that are ready to sort of pick up the slack here if and when they finally get the situation in the Strait of Hormuz taken care of here. There's no buffer, no cushion. Why is there still a lot of optimism out there, not just from the administration, but even from some of the corporate CEOs that we heard from?
I think they have witnessed the fact that nothing happened in round one. And I like to say commodities are spot asset. They price today's fundamentals. We were burning through the inventory cushion buffer. We didn't have shortages. We had a deficit, meaning that demand was above supply, you were drawing the inventories. We didn't run out of oil. This time around, why do we have products trading at these all-time high levels, and you have diesel, I think in New York Harbor is like $130 or $140 a barrel? Because we are now witnessing the probability of running into real shortages of products. But eventually, there's still enough refining capacity as you'll burn through a lot of this crude, particularly of China. And from what I understand, the margins are big for exports. They lifted the export ban out of China. Those refineries are going to come back and start processing that. So you're going to see the rise in crude as you move closer to the product prices. But I think the main reason why there is a high level of confidence this is not going to be bad is, like I call it, the abundance illusion. They're looking at the inventory draws. China helped out with flexing its system, and we didn't see the shortages. So everybody's convinced round two you won't see the shortages. The situation, this is it, and both sides have entrenched themselves. Oh, one other fact that makes this one different: Saudi and the Houthis are at it. The Houthis control the Red Sea. They can take out Yanbu, which was the diversion export for Saudi Arabia. So the situation this time around is just far different and far more dangerous.
Jeff, do you think that demand destruction can offset supply shortages, or do you think we're entering a new era in which oil prices are just structurally higher and that's the new normal?
I was arguing before this ever happened, we were going to enter a new area where all commodity prices, whether it's oil, metals, agriculture, the rest of them are going to be structurally higher. In fact, everything was going that direction until the ceasefire in April, whether it was metals prices or what. And a part of that is, we call it the revenge of the old economy, that you need to have investment in these old economy, asset-heavy industries that were starved of capital in favor of asset-light, like technology. So the underlying fundamentals are very different. And I completely agree. We're in a period where hard assets, the halo trade, I like to define halo as hard assets, local operations, meaning we're going to rebuild our supply chains, energy security, all of these, defense, all play into this, which are going to lead to higher prices. So, I think this is just part of a sequence, whether it was, the first invasion of Ukraine with Russia, back in 2022, or the Straits of Hormuz, or the next round of Iran, Russia. All of this is the deglobalization theme in process, which just leads to higher commodity prices.
So markets seem comfortable with oil in the $70 to $80 range. At what price do you think that this will economically slow growth and maybe change central bank thinking?
The question around slowing growth is, it's not so much the price of the commodities, that's a relative price thing. The question on inflation is, do you end up with higher overall price levels? So the commodities in oil are a relative price movement. The inflation question and the rate hike question is, does this lead to broader inflationary pressures? I'm not a big believer in the cost push inflation, but I think the question around growth is a very interesting and important one. Because if we end up with shortages, that's how you end up with impact on growth. Everybody likes to tell me, oh, well, Europe survived 2022. It survived, but it lost 25% of its energy-intensive industrial output. That's the growth problem. And when we think about what happened in Europe, and if this thing extends on, you don't have the products, you don't have the oil, it will hit growth. There's no other option. And the insurance policies are gone. I also want to point out, there is no strategic petroleum reserve for products. So the ability to, find ways to get out of this starts to become extraordinarily difficult.
Hey, Jeff, before I let you go, I do want to get your thoughts on what's going on in the energy sector outside of geopolitics. And this has more to do with energy intensity, the needs for this AI build out and boom, coming off that PJM disclosure yesterday and everything we know about this build out. Do you have any sense here that we will find some equilibrium anytime soon with regards to supply and demand?
No, I think we need to start spending money. You got to see FID, whether it's upstream in oil and gas, downstream in refining, and metals and mining. All of these sectors are severely underinvested. You look at metals and mining, CapEx is down 35% from its peak. You need a lot of metal in those data centers. And you need metal for the grid. You need metal for transformers. You need metal for turbines. We need oil and gas to burn in them. We got to get to a point where commodity prices are high enough to attract capital back to the sector. You need higher return on investment to compete with the asset-light group. And the asset-light group, their returns are coming down. You look at the hyperscalers, these guys are commodity guys. They're in a cyclical business. It is cyclical. They need to be re-rated. We need to see the commodity markets re-rated. But the reason why investors don't touch them is they're such a small part of the overall indices now. You go back at its peak in the last cycle around 2014, energy was roughly 18% of the S&P. It runs around 3% now. So even if it doubled, a portfolio manager who's running a broad portfolio looks at, I can miss out. And we needed the commodity prices to move higher to get that capital to come back in the space to give the build out in the underlying production to be able to accommodate the AI, the electrification, the data center boom. So we still have a long ways to go here because you got to get the FID up. China helped out with, flexing.
We're going to go to General Keen. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. You can get it in veggie cap form or in the powder form. It'll help to improve your gut biome. And by improving your gut biome, you're going to be able to absorb your nutrients better. Your metabolism will improve. You'll be able to sleep better because a good gut biome helps with sleep patterns. You'll be able to consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system. By having a good gut biome, you're reducing leaky gut syndrome. You're improving your immune system and the mucosal layer of your gut. Good health starts at the gut. And with good gut health, not only are you improving your metabolism, but you're also improving your skin. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the very high quality probiotics that I offer. You can get it in veggie cap form or in the powder form. I prefer taking the powder because I mix it with my foods in the afternoon. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Use discount 5 so you can save some money. The link is in the description of this video to get to my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's figure out what's going on with this war in
For retired four-star General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst, chairman of the Institute of the Study of War. General, here we are, day 6 of this campaign. Is there how would you describe the game plan, and how are we doing in executing it?
Well, actually, we're executing Project Freedom. Remember, that was the plan to open the Straits of Hormuz back on May the 4th. It was a plan at that time to be about 2 weeks in length. It was a very comprehensive plan, and we're executing it. And we're not naming it, but that's the fact. And that plan is, 1, to secure the straits, to clear the straits, and then also to protect shipping. And what you're seeing is 1, the focus to take down all the means for them to interfere with shipping. Missiles, drones, fast boats, and then the things that help and enable it, command and control, sensors, radars, and the logistical infrastructure support for it. And then we're also hitting Iran's ability to retaliate against the Gulf states, U.S. bases, or Israel if they choose to do that as well. And that's ballistic missiles, launch systems, and also drone inventory and storage sites. Isolating the Straits of Hormuz was always part of the plan. So that's why you see bridges being destroyed, because we don't want them to come in and be able to reinforce logistically and begin to recover the capabilities that we're taking away from them. So nothing different about this. We just never saw Project Freedom being executed fully. Remember, it got stopped in the 36th hour, something outrageous by Saudi Arabia, if you recall, who would not permit us to fly out of their airbase and not permit us to use their airspace, and also put pressure on us to stop the operation. So this takes some time to unfold to truly get it right. And hopefully this time we'll be able to complete it and get it right. And then here's what we got to remember. For Iran, the Straits of Hormuz is a strategic asset. No matter what happens here, they will continue to want to take it back from us because it's number one. They don't have a nuclear power capability. They're not even close to developing a weapon now. This is their number one strategic asset. It gives them leverage over the Gulf states in the region, and they truly want to have an element of control here. And they are willing to fight us for it, and we have got to take it away from them and prevent them from ever getting it back under their control again. And let's finish this operation to get that done.
General, is it possible to make Iran incapable of stopping the Strait of Hormuz?
Yes. I mean, can they harass a little bit? Certainly. But we can take down all of their means and all of their ability to control it. And it just takes some time to deal with this. And it's a comprehensive plan, to be sure. Let's complete the plan. And now we're going to have, what are the Iranians doing now? They're doing what they did once before to stop us on April the 8th. And that is, we're willing to make a deal. And what do they want us to do? They just want us to stop what they're doing. We're taking their number one strategic asset away from them, and they're going to talk about making a deal. Now, let's get something straight for the American people. There is a fiction created by the Iranians that there's a diplomatic side to the Iranians that are moderates and they really want to make a deal. And then there's these hardliners, the IRGC and others, who are don't want to make a deal. And these diplomatic guys have got to work with them and help us work with them, Americans. You got to understand the challenges that we're facing. That is all fiction created by them to play us. And we've got to wake up to the facts that are really in front of us. And the evidence speaks louder than their words. They broke the MOU within days of their president signing it.
Yes.
That's a reality. Why? Because of what I said. This is at their center of gravity. This is their strategic asset. We should not fall prey to this recent and now diplomatic overture to make a deal again. They just want to stop us from taking this strategic asset away from them. We've got to get on with doing it.
So there is no moderates, and we learned that in the 80s, if you paid attention. There are no moderates. There's a good cop, bad cop, however they're playing it. They're speaking with one voice, but they pretend to speak with two. Lastly, Iran says, if you guys target our power plants, we're going to tell the Houthis to shut off the best they can the Red Sea. We'll see that map. Can the Houthis do that? And what would we do if they tried?
Well, the Houthis certainly can fire and initially shut it down, but then they're going to pay an awful price. We came close to taking just about everything away from the Houthis once before. We didn't finish that campaign because they were willing to do what? They were willing to stop interfering with the Red Sea and the Suez Canal, which Bab Mandab leads to it. And they know full well what's coming if they attempt to do this. And it would likely bring the Israelis back into this and major combat operations again. So that's their choice to make, certainly, but we can deal with that if they execute that.
It's a very impressive war plan that's happening right now. We're not talking a lot about it. The Institute for Study of War is covering it, and General Jack Keen's all over it. General, thanks so much. Truly appreciate it. And hopefully we'll continue to have success as Day 6 is done. Thank you, General.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
All right, we're going to play a video from Morning Joe because he's upset about Trump and his speech last night. Morning Joe was so intelligent. Morning Joe always is on top of things. Declassified documents undercut Trump's election claims. All right, let's see what Morning Joe has to say.
And this is part of the documents that the White House released. Russian actors have circulated narratives about voter fraud resulting from mail-in balloting and called some U.S. primary voting processes rigged by the Democratic Party, where basically the intel community, and this was Donald Trump's intel community in 2020, admitting that Donald Trump was using Vladimir Putin's talking points. The Russian government are advancing narratives with U.S. officials and other prominent persons as well online. These figures, says the documents released by Donald Trump, these figures are conspiring to intensify efforts as the election approaches to orchestrate a high-profile scandal implicating Joe Biden and the Democratic Party at the peak of the 2020 U.S. presidential election. This document released by Donald Trump to prove that U.S. elections in 2020 were rigged says their aim is to defeat former Vice President Joe Biden and to ensure President Trump's victory. The incompetence is staggering. It's overwhelming. He has this speech. The Republicans, for people that don't know, I know you know this, Republicans were freaking out on the Hill all day. They did not want him to give this speech because they knew it would end just this way. With Americans concerned about how much gas costs, how much their rent costs, how much their health care costs, how much their health care costs, and how much their health care costs, the war going on in Iran. He does his speech anyway, and this is what happens. The only thing he proves is, well, let me read his words, that the Russians' aim was to defeat Joe Biden and ensure Donald Trump's victory. That's Russia. That's Russia. And also, of course, that the Russians were using their time-tested theory of vote rigging in a Western democracy, which Donald Trump picked up and spouted out and accepted just hook, line, and sinker. So tell me about the speech last night. What did he accomplish? What did he not accomplish? And was he really just trying to lay the predicate for trying to rig the November election?
Well, I think first we should say, Joe, that I'm not sure what do you think the total number of times that Donald Trump has said that the theory that Russia intervened in the American election in 2016 and in 2020 to try to help him win? How many times do you think he said that's a hoax over the last 10 years?
Right.
I mean, can you count that high?
Right.
Can you count that high?
No, I can't.
And now he's declassified. Now he's classified a bunch of documents that basically prove that what Robert Mueller said in 2016, which was there was no collusion between the two of them, but also that the Russians had intervened in the election on Donald Trump's behalf, and that it just happened again in 2020. The Russians like Donald Trump. They want him to win. They're on his side. That's what these documents prove with respect to Russia. I think that, Joe, you pointed out the people on the Hill did not want him to give this speech for a variety of reasons. This is the last topic that any Republican who's in a contested election in America wants to be talking about right now. Election conspiracy theories, Donald Trump's monomania over something that happened now more than 5 years ago in 2020, as opposed to talking about the real lives of real people in 2026 and the future.
Are the Dominion servers and the Akamai network secure? The answer is no. Do we have dead people voting? Yes. Do we have illegal aliens voting? Yes. We have election integrity problems. It needs to be fixed. Instead of, oh, Trump Trump is all bad. Oh, Trump is always bad. Trump is always bad. What about the data breach that just took place that Trump said last night? Where the Chinese have 220 million voter registration records. 220 million. That seems to be a problem. And then just to step back and just think about, what about that jump diffusion at 4 o'clock in the morning where mail-in ballots seem to only go to Joe Biden? That seems awfully odd to me. That is statistically impossible, what happened there. So anyone that wants to be honest, just look at the data. The count data. Does it look fishy? And the answer is yes. And then the question is, what happened? Because what happened in 2020 in terms of that jump diffusion, that's a signal of impropriety. But they know better. They know better. Joe, Morning Joe knows better. Really?
So they don't even want this topic on the radar, let alone to have Donald Trump doing what he did last night, which was, scoring what I believe they call in the World Cup parlance an own goal on so many of these matters. And I do think that the key element of this speech is the assertion that, without evidence, that a number of foreign powers, principally China, but also Venezuela and others, have the ability, as if to kind of suggest that at will, they could go into American voting systems, that the electronic counting systems are easily manipulable, and that the hostile foreign powers will be able to change votes, even though there's no evidence adduced anywhere in this that they've ever done that before, but that their ability to do it is setting the table for a claim after the midterm elections, if they don't go the way Donald Trump wants them to, that is precisely what has happened here. And you can very easily imagine Donald Trump just saying, well, I told you China could manipulate our elections, and now on the face of it, it's obvious that they have. We must have an investigation over the course of the next 2 years. Yeah. This is why we must federalize elections. We now have to investigate. We have to get to the bottom of this, but obviously this election is fraudulent. I just, that it's as clear as day. That's part of what this speech was about, was setting the table for that.
Right. So what's so in... Right. So what's so interesting is something new here, and that is how the media covered this. And Willie, first of all, Fox had that disclaimer that they were reading a legal brief practically for a million different reasons.
Well, for 778 million
reasons.
Yeah.
And then Fox News this morning, the comfy couch, they didn't mention this speech when they opened the show this morning. So that's incredible in itself. And then a lot of networks chose not to cover it. And if I understand correctly, CBS, because Tony DeCoppel's been kicked around a bit, they did an extensive fact check on the speech, pointing out disinformation. I think the media, in some ways, did its job here.
Yeah, I think that's right, Mika. I mean, there's not an obligation on the part of the...
I would love to have the media and statisticians take a look at the data and take a look at other countries, and do you have similar jump diffusions like Venezuela? What kind of machines were they using? Dominion, maybe? Oh, and then not just the statistical impossibility of these events, but what about the data that was released by the White House? I haven't looked at it. I don't want to look at it. I'm too busy. But the thing is that why doesn't the mainstream media, who have lots of investigative journalists, start going into this information that was released and find out what's really going on. Instead of a knee-jerk reaction. It is impossible for them to dissect all of the documents that were released last night and have a show in the mornings saying how bad Trump is. I watched the speech last night in real time. And immediately it was on C-SPAN that I watched. I watched the feed from C-SPAN. And then after the feed, I went to Al Jazeera to see their perspective. Immediately, they had Never Trumpers on saying how Trump is just pushing a narrative that's false. Well, did you look at the data? Because a real researcher, a real journalist would actually say, we need to take a look at the information that the White House provided in these 5 tranches, or 6 tranches, I think it's 5 tranches, and we'll get back to you. We don't know. Hold opinion. No, they have a knee-jerk reaction saying they get an author on that wrote a nasty book about Trump, that Trump must be wrong. Really? Well, maybe there is something that Trump is signaling to the public, that there are nefarious actors in our country. You want to get even crazier? All this was happening during the first year of COVID. That was the 2020 election happened in the first year of COVID. And if the Chinese were involved to try to prevent Trump from getting elected, and you have to remember what was happening in 2019. There were trade agreements, and there was going back and forth, and Trump was being heavy-handed with the Chinese. Remember, the Chinese delegation came to the White House. He signed an agreement. But there were a lot of exit clauses that were in this agreement dealing with agriculture. And shortly after that, we had some weird thing happen in China. The election impropriety and what we went through in the crisis of 2020 are related. I am 100% sure of that. And that's the elephant in the room. That's the crazy crap that these stupid journalists can't get their head around. But Morning Joe's gonna tell you how it is. Really? What's your IQ, Morning Joe? Maybe you need to sip some more coffee. Get those brain cells moving. Morning Joe.
To platform just bald-faced lies and amplify them to tens and millions of people in this country. NBC did not take it live. ABC did not take it live. And before Trump supporters show their outrage, there were speeches, primetime speeches by President Biden and President Obama that the networks decided they didn't need to take live either. There's a precedent for this. But there was a decision made in several networks not to show this stuff because we've heard it all before. We know it's lies. The other approach was the one you touched on, which was CBS.
Think about that. There was new information that Trump said about the Chinese involvement, and that 220 million records of voters had been commandeered by the Chinese. That's news. That's news, as Niall Ferguson says. Or is the news noise? How could he state that? That he's heard this all before? Really? That was the first time I heard it. He knew that the Chinese took voter records? He knew this? Well, why didn't he say it? If he didn't know it. We all heard it before. That's brand new information. Unless you're in the intelligent community with classified information, so how the hell would he know the classified information? Unless there were people within the deep state leaking. See the problem here? They're either having information and withholding it to the American public and spinning a lie, or they're not doing their job and actually reading documents that are actually declassified and released to the public. Which is it? Maybe it's a little bit of both.
Before and after gave long kind of takedowns of what the president said. Even, I will say, Fox News came out of it and Sean Hannity was hosting. He was not thrilled by the speech. I think low energy and let's move along was kind of the theme of the night. Quick wrap up of it, not sort of fanning the flames of the claims. Let's turn the corner and get to some other stories. So, and you know, our MS Now and others, they dipped into it and then came out as soon as the lies started and debunked all of it. And even streaming platforms at NBC News did kind of the same thing there. So, yeah, I think that there was a decision made that we're not going to stand by or we're not going to participate in this further campaign by the president to lead up to something else, Sam Stein, which he kind of gave away at the end of the speech, which is, here are all these claims that, by the way, are not true, but I'm going to put them out there anyway. And why am I giving this speech in prime time? Because of what I just said. Now we must pass the SAVE Act. So this is pretext. This is predicate for what he wants to do. He's been stymied a bit in the Senate. They say they're not going to pass the SAVE Act, so he may find other ways to influence the outcome of the 2026 election on the platform, on the foundation of these lies he told last night.
Well, like the rest of you, I put on my tuxedo last night to watch the speech. Got the cummerbund on this morning, accidentally. This did seem, I thought the biggest part of the speech was sort of the unstated context, which we've been alluding to here. Why give the speech now, right? I mean, some of the stuff that I was sorting through the documents last night they put up has been declassified for weeks or months by Tulsi Gabbard and others. Some of it's old and has been out there in the public already. They could have done a version of this speech at various points during the last year. So why do it now? And the only sort of logical explanation is that this is pretext, as you said, that they are going to say, well, there's real vulnerabilities. We have evidence that China has access to this voting data, which, by the way, you can buy. We could see, the mail-in balloting is insecure. Therefore, we need to federalize these elections. And that's the real concern that when you talk to people in the democracy protection community will happen, that we're going to get into, we're like a couple months away now, just months of intense litigation around what role the federal government has in administering state-run elections, because they are state-run. And so I sorted through all this stuff last night. I went through these documents. It is woefully unsubstantiated, the claims that he made. In fact, as Joe's been talking about, a lot of the stuff that's in these documents, primary material, just supports the opposite. It supports the idea that Russia was the primary actor here.
Instead of saying it, have a show where you go from one document to another, maybe not all the documents, but the key ones, and state the claim that Trump has and show the document. Why don't they do that? Most people would watch that. Now, maybe these podcasters out there will do this. I don't know. But it seems fishy to me for the public to say, or the mainstream media to say, that we have elections that are safe.
Through the elections. And yet none of this matters in this post-truth world where Trump is going, I mean, obviously matters, but we are in a post-truth world where Trump will use this stuff, all this evidence that doesn't support his claim, to create a legal rationale, political rationale, to ramp up the federal government's involvement in our midterms. That's the only conclusion people are drawing.
Well, and you look at the polls, Mika, what's so sad is that actually almost 2/3 of Republicans have just marched in lockstep or in an Orwellian way to say, oh yeah, the 2020 election was rigged, because dear leader has been repeating it so much. Only 9% of Democrats, only 21% of independents believe that. But how sad that an entire party has gone lockstep right. And God did exactly what George Orwell warned about. The party tells you not to use your ears, not to use your eyes, to just blindly follow their leader. And this is where it leads you. It leads you down a pack of lies. Good luck with that.
All right. I apologize for sneezing, but because of the HVAC system, some of that particulate matter from the fire from Canada is in the air here. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the ashwagandha root. Ashwagandha root will help to control your cortisol levels and your blood glucose levels. Really important. Lignans will help to boost up your immune system and your endocrine system, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals. And turmeric will soak up free radicals and bring down inflammation. Now, soaking up free radicals will help your mitochondria, so you'll have more energy too. So it's a side effect. It's a benefit. By bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals, you are improving that mitochondrial health. Your metabolism, cellular metabolism will improve, and your ATP will actually go up. So it's really important. Now, by taking turmeric, you can take it separately. You can take any of these separately, but stack them to get the max benefit. And what this will do is by stacking the ashwagandha root, the lignans, and the turmeric together, you're going to be able to improve your cardiovascular system, improve your immune system, and your endocrine system, help with brain function, help with your metabolism. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, stack these, and this is part of this core protocol to slow down the aging process. The probiotics, the VAX35, the C60, this stack here, and the Boomer Boost. That's a very powerful stack to help slow down the aging process and help all these different organ systems to perform better. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's a key feature to slow down aging, bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, boost up those energy levels, help improve that mitochondria. And you do wonders with the improvement of your mitochondria in your cells by bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals. Super important. Because when you start talking to people that are older and that look like they've aged and are acting like they've aged, what are the common things? They're oxidizing faster, they're methylating their genes faster, they have inflammation, and they're producing more free radicals. And oh, by the way, they have less energy. So if you target all those things that I just mentioned, you'll slow down the aging process. All right. Let's go to BBC and their take of Trump's speech.
We start with breaking news, and that is that President Trump has accused China of extensive interference in the 2020 US elections and also alleged that US intelligence had covered up attempts by Beijing to damage him electorally. In an address to the nation, the US president, who lost that election to Joe Biden, repeated his claims it had been rigged against him. Dozens of investigations, audits, and court proceedings at all levels have failed to find any evidence of fraud. Opposition Democrats had warned ahead of this speech that Mr. Trump was laying the ground to interfere in November's midterm elections, in which the Republicans risk losing control of Congress.
U.S. spy agencies began learning about the compromise of voter registration files in 2020 when they discovered that tens of millions of voter data, think of that, tens of millions voters' data in 18 states have been bought, stolen, or hacked by China. Yet those responsible for sounding the alarm instead kept the information secret and hidden. They did not disclose to me as president or to anyone else, and to the best of our knowledge, they did not inform Congress. In fact, all they kept saying is, this is the most secure election in the history of our country.
So that was President Trump speaking just a short time ago. Let's speak to our correspondents now. And join me from Washington and Beijing. We have Nick Johnson and Steve McDonald, who's going to be taking us through reaction to those comments by President Trump. Let's start first with reaction from the United States. Nick, there had been expectation about the comments that we heard from President Trump, but what sort of reaction has there been since those comments were made?
Well, a lot of Democrats, as you might imagine, have described what President Trump says as completely bogus, as repeating false information, misinformation. But going back to the content of this speech, I mean, this is safe territory for Donald Trump. In a world that he hasn't been able to control, a narrative he hasn't been able to control over the Iran war over the past few months, this is going over safe ground for him. A claim that he's repeated over the past 6 years, that election in 2020 was stolen from him. And as you heard there, he said this time it was, he laid the target at China. He said that he said that they'd been interfering. He said that they'd managed to get hold of hundreds of thousands of US voter details, but he didn't go into any explanation as to how the possession of those voter details, personal information, phone numbers, what sort of impact those would have had on that election in 2020. There was an investigation that was carried out in 2021 by John Ratcliffe. He's now the director of the CIA, that found that there was no foreign interference in that election whatsoever. I think the reason that Donald Trump is doing this now is, I've already mentioned the fact that he hasn't been able to control the narrative with Iran. This is a narrative he feels he can control. He also wants to get his Save America Act through Congress. Now, that's a bill that he wants.
I haven't heard any of the mainstream media mentioning the intelligence community withheld information in the presidential brief about election impropriety. Why? Why did leaders of the intelligence community fail to inform the President of the United States? That seems like they have something to hide.
Pass whereby voters turning up to the polls here in the US will have to show voter ID, but also proof of citizenship, which Donald Trump and some Republicans think will shore up the integrity of the voting system in the US. But also, I think he's making these claims now because he and the Republicans have not been doing well in the opinion polls, largely because of the cost of living, which is high here at the moment, but also the ongoing war with Iran and the impact that has had on oil and gas prices. And it looks like that the Republicans may well lose the House of Representatives in November in the midterms, and it's very close between them and the Democrats in the Senate. And it feels like Donald Trump is sort of painting a picture of a fragile voting system whereby he can claim that any victory for the Democrats in November may well be rigged.
And coming to you, Stephen, China obviously watching this. Reaction locally where you are?
So the Chinese government has responded initially in the form of a statement from its embassy in Washington saying that it hasn't meddled in the US elections and nor would it ever do so. In the coming hours, we will have a press conference from the Foreign Ministry, the regular Foreign Ministry press briefing, and no doubt questions will come up about this, and we might expect similar comments, I think, at that press briefing. But really what everyone's interested here is in the potential impact of this on Xi Jinping's trip to Washington later this year. Now, Donald Trump had invited him to travel to Washington in September. And remember, they had this meeting in China earlier this year. Now, there's only two possibilities, really. One is that the Chinese government says, you know what, we're not going to do that anymore. You know, you've made these scurrilous allegations against us, so the trip's off. Another possibility, though, is that the party here, the Communist Party, thinks, look, no one's really going to be taking these unsubstantiated allegations so seriously. They can see this for what it is. It's the cut and thrust of politics in America. In the lead up to those midterm elections and Donald Trump's attempts to potentially discredit the results, as we heard earlier. And so trade is number one. What the hell, we'll just put this all to one side, ignore it, and the trip will go ahead. But either way, it is going to be very interesting to see how they do respond in the coming months regarding that possible trip.
Just coming back to you, Nick, you mentioned the Save America Act. There has been very interesting reaction from Chuck Schumer to this on X. What have they said to that?
Well, I mean, it's continued sort of reaction that you might expect from the Democrats here about the concerns about Donald Trump spreading misinformation such as this. And Donald Trump, there was a lot of build-up to this speech here in Washington this afternoon, but a number of the US networks here, ABC being one of them, decided not to take the speech live. And actually, Donald Trump spoke out about that in the speech itself. He said that any of those networks that didn't take his speech live, who didn't want to broadcast such an important announcement, should have their licenses taken away, which would, of course, raise questions about the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and what that means for the press here and how it covers Donald Trump's future speeches.
One of those outlets, of course, Nick, is Fox News, and this ties in directly to those documents that you mentioned. Heavily redacted, I understand, and only released once the speech had begun. You heard Donald Trump saying, "Go to," I think it was the White House. He gave the White House web address. But Fox News also coming out saying, "We cannot fact check or verify anything that President Trump has said," which is unusual. This is a pro-Trump news outlet.
Yeah, and Fox News did carry that speech live in its entirety. But yeah, I mean, some of those documents we understand have been redacted. Some commentators here have said that some of those documents that have been released have actually already been in the public domain for a few years and don't necessarily contain anything new. And we were aware of concerns about possible election interference.
Some, but what about all? See, I'm sure that there's some new information in those 5 tranches. So tell the American public what they are and how important it is, independent of if you like Trump or hate Trump. These journalists need to do their job. All they're doing is regurgitating, reading a teleprompter and regurgitating. The only ones that are actually going to do the work is the independent journalists out there on X and the podcasters. That's where you're going to get the information, because these clowns can't do it for you. They don't want to. They just want to read a teleprompt.
Not just in 2020, but in elections subsequently and prior to that. So I think we should get more detail in the coming days. Hopefully, I think we understand that the Department of Homeland Security is going to be giving a press announcement tomorrow detailing their plans for any investigation based on some of those claims that Donald Trump was making earlier.
And finally, Stephen, obviously we have got the upcoming visit to DC by Xi Jinping. We've just had the visit by President Trump and that heavy business delegation to China. Just remind us how relations are between the two countries with that upcoming trip by Xi Jinping to the US.
Well, of course, they've been tense in recent years following Donald Trump's tariff onslaught and the like. It's China successfully pushing back on that and him losing that battle with China, really. And then they decide they're going to rebuild relations. So Donald Trump comes out here, it's sort of bridges being built. But there weren't any huge breakthroughs on that trip. I mean, what was hoped for, and I guess what was seen to have been achieved, was a sort of semi-normalization between the superpowers and the hope that in the future there could be much more improvement, especially when it comes to trade and the various areas of blockages. But that was all contingent on Xi Jinping then going later on this year to Washington and the process continuing. And so now we have Donald Trump making these accusations against China, accusations seen by the Chinese government as kind of ridiculous. And so here we are. You wonder, is it going to go ahead? Are those, I mean, apart from Xi Jinping's visit, there are also these ongoing talks at ministerial level between the two governments. They're supposedly ironing out all these trade frictions and what have you. So, yeah, like I say, in the coming weeks and months, it will be interesting to see how China responds to this.
Okay, that's Steve McDonald, Beijing. Nick Johnson in Washington. Thank you to you both.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Good Night Formula. Good Night Formula will help with you getting into the 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep, help to detoxify your central nervous system, consolidate memory, and you'll be well rested. By doing that every day, you'll slow down the aging process and improve your brain function. This has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Omega-3 helps your cardiovascular health, brings down inflammation, reduces the over stickiness of your red blood cells, so it's reducing overclotting, and it helps your lipid profile to reduce plaque formation. Take it every day. Omega-3, super important for your cardiovascular health. And vitamin B complex. If you're 40 years of age or older, take vitamin B complex. Why? Because vitamin B complex will help with your energy, rev up your cellular metabolism, and protect your neurons. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. So a great stack, help protect your neurons and rev up your cellular metabolism and energy levels. Take the vitamin B complex. The omega-3 helps with your cardiovascular health. And Good Night Formula helps to slow down aging and improve your brain function. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video, and use discount 5 and you get $5 off. All caps, discount 5. Because Joe Biden created a lot of inflation and people don't have a lot of money. All right. Let's listen into CNN about Iran.
Vital resources are coming under fire in Kuwait today. Iran struck a power and desalination plant there, prompting urgent public warnings from the government. Those warnings were to conserve water and electricity even as temperatures soar into the mid-40s on the Celsius scale. Iran also says it targeted US assets in Oman, Jordan, and elsewhere, and it is threatening the ports of its Gulf neighbors. This all coming after an escalation in US attacks, including strikes on bridges in the south of Iran in what was a 6th straight night of bombing. CNN's Nick Robertson joining us today from Jerusalem. And Nick, 30 days after the very what felt like historic signing of that MOU, it does seem as if things have escalated in a way that makes it feel very uncomfortable in the region. What do you make of these developments and where we are at?
I think obviously we're on an escalatory military cycle. I think that because neither side has said we're outrightly scrapping the MOU sort of remains marginalized completely on the sidelines of these military operations, but it's still a document that's intact. And one can possibly see a time where either side can recommend going back to that, having decided that through the military means at the moment, they're not getting where they want to. So I think on the diplomatic front, that document, although it's no use to anyone at the moment, can be, again, useful in the future because it is the blueprint for the way out of the current situation. But if you just look at the range of these strikes that are going on, and break it down very, very simply here. Both sides have a reason for hitting the targets that they hit. Iran says it hits US military bases and assets in the region. Clearly last night it hit a civilian facility in Kuwait that is a huge vulnerability for all Gulf countries, the desalination and power plants that go with them that provide the AC, that provide the clean water that people drink. For most of the Gulf countries, these are absolutely essential and indispensable. So they're a massive pressure point. So Iran's ratcheted up to that level. If you look at what the United States is doing and understand how militaries work, they won't just be throwing their munitions around, we'll put some here, we'll put some there. They'll be thinking of what are we planning on doing next week? Where do we think we might be in a week's time or 2 weeks' time? So we'll have operations that shape us towards that. Number one, making sure that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be safe for the travel of vessels, which means taking out infrastructure, port facilities along the Strait of Hormuz. But it's going beyond that. It's trying to get to the infrastructure that links those areas around the Strait of Hormuz, particularly Bandar Abbas and some of the other ports along there, to deeper inside of Iran, as well as denying other ports, as well as targeting Bushehr, where there is an Iranian military airbase, which is about less than 1 minute's fighter jet flight from Karg Island, which again has been floated in the deep past as a possible target. That's where we seem to be.
Yeah, and Tehran issuing threats over the Gulf's oil lifeline at this point. It does seem as if it is, though, widening its target list. Syria, Iraq, Jordan. We already know that it's targeted Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, of course, and Oman. But I wonder what the message is here, do you think, from Iran in widening that lens, widening the scope of these targets outside of the Gulf?
Yeah, it's what's often called the escalatory ladder, isn't it? You target just a couple of Gulf countries in the beginning. It's been Kuwait, it was Bahrain. Now it's up to a former US base, Al Tanf, inside of Syria that hadn't been struck before. It's interesting that Saudi Arabia hasn't been struck so far in this round, and Saudi Arabia normally considers itself at the top of that escalatory ladder, but Iran threatening to hit ports in the region, threatening these sort of highest value, most prized asset that's mostly been outside of the war in Saudi Arabia, Yanbu port there, where the oil exports go through, where exports to the Red Sea and imports, frankly, as well, come into the country, come into the region, as well as Jebel Ali, a principal port in the Emirates, where you are. That would be a huge blow for the Emiratis if Iran was to continue to go after that Hamad port in Qatar. Just a number of ports in the region. And I think if we think back to those days at the beginning of April, just before the ceasefire came into play, I think it was the 8th or 9th of April, what Iran did on the last night of strikes was to strike sort of the deepest and send significant messages of what it was still capable of. So it sent the warning then, and now it's saying, we can do this. We're putting it on the table. So yes, we're in a cycle of escalation.
Let's discuss this and more with CNN senior military analyst, the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired Admiral James Stavridis. Admiral, thanks very much for joining us. Many of these bridges in Iran that were targeted by the U.S. were on routes connected to the city of Bandar Abbas, which is home to an Iranian military naval base, as you well know. What does that signal to you about the U.S. strategy that's unfolding right now?
Two things. Well, first,
watch all FIFA World Cup matches on Fox 1, available with YouTube. Now it's easy to watch, even when it's hard to watch.
Two things. Well, first, it is going to attempt to cut off, to kill the assets that could be used to close the Strait of Hormuz. I've been to Bandar Abbas before the revolution. Obviously, it's a very important naval port for the Iranians. and cutting it off has high military utility. So point one, go after the places where the Iranians have weapons systems that help them close the strait. Point two, in general, going after infrastructure like bridges, roads, puts economic pressure on Iran. I think that is part of the administration's strategy here to get Iran back to the table. In a phrase, what they're doing is escalate in order to de-escalate, meaning go after economic targets, military targets, put pressure on more attacks with the hope that you can then de-escalate and the Iranians will come back to the table. That's the strategy.
And as you know, Iran is now retaliating big time with attacks on various U.S. military assets across the Gulf region. The Iranian military claims it targeted a U.S. air base in Qatar and for the first time a U.S. base in Syria. It also says it destroyed a long-range radar system and several U.S. refueling aircraft. If all of this is true, Admiral, how does this impact the U.S. military's abilities in the region?
So far, we have sufficient combat power in order to overcome the level of strikes you're seeing from Iran. And let's be honest here about the numbers. The U.S. is launching dozens and dozens of strikes a day at this point, far less than during the initial wave, but 100, 200 strikes a day. Iran is responding with 10, maybe 15 strikes. So over time, that's going to favor the U.S. military capacity to continue these strikes. However, it does show the Iranians are increasing their ability to go after their neighbors. That ought to concern us because if they start going after Gulf oil and gas infrastructure, that'll have big economic downside for the Western economies as well.
Yeah, so far they're going after the U.S. military sites in these friendly Arab Gulf nations like the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, elsewhere in the region. These are all very close friends, allies of the United States. The U.S. has major bases in the United Arab Emirates and in Qatar at Camp Asaliya, the Yellowdade Air Base. I've been to those facilities. They're really home to much of the U.S. military's central command in that region. And the Iranians keep attacking those U.S. sites. This is very significant, isn't it?
It is indeed, and I want to draw a line under one other kind of troubling item that's surfacing, and that is Iran starting to talk about closing not the Strait of Hormuz, which they've effectively done, but closing what is called the Bab el-Mandeb. It's at the very bottom of the map you're showing, at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, the bottom of the Red Sea. They've got the Houthis there who have capability to attack commercial shipping. If you close that choke point, that closes effectively the Suez Canal right under the word Israel on your map. That is a major global choke point, just like the Strait of Hormuz. If the Iranians can push the Houthis into doing that, you've opened a new front, a Western front, if you will, in this war. So that is one to watch and one to be concerned about in the weeks ahead.
In his address, his primetime televised address last night, the president said one sentence, and it was a total of about 7 seconds, we checked, related to the war with Iran in his nearly 27-minute speech overall. When he first announced he was going to give a televised address, I thought it would be on the war with Iran, but it wasn't. It was on election, so-called election interference. Was that, in your view, a missed opportunity for President Trump?
It was, and the numbers are very clear on this. This war is unpopular across the entire political spectrum. President Trump's own popularity overall is as low as it's been throughout his 2 terms of the presidency. And I think Americans just don't have a sense of what's the exit strategy, what's the end game here. And when you start getting those questions from the public, that's the time to do that nationally televised address and reassure people and tell them you have a plan and tell them what the next step is. I'm with you. That's what I was hoping to hear when I caught a snippet of a televised presidential address. It's about elections. Those are important, but I think the public would, at this point, like to hear what's the next move in the Middle East.
Yeah, in his 7 seconds on the war in Iran, he basically said
please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the zeolite. Zeolite will help to bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Detoxifying your body is super important, especially if you do it daily, because it's going to help to improve your immune system and endocrine system, help with your different organ systems, including your cardiovascular and brain, also your liver. So please go to my store and get the zeolite. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink filtered water, do that daily. This zeolite you can take every day. It's a very high quality zeolite. Now, for ones that want to do a heavy detox, maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, take 5 to 10 small drops underneath your tongue, drink the filtered water. Do that daily until the bottle's done, and do that once or twice a year. Now, another great supplement that I have is collagen. Collagen will help to improve your skin, your hair, your nails, your musculature, your joint health, also bone density. Take this collagen every day. Now, I recommend that you take the vitamin C and magnesium supplement with this and drink filtered water so it cross-links and improves your dermal layer. Collagen. Collagen will help to remodel your joints if you have a sports injury or arthritis. Now, collagen will help to block pain. It blocks the pain gatekeeper NAV 1.7. Collagen will help to reduce erosion of your joint by blocking MMP3 and MMP13. Collagen will also help to block the enzymes that cause inflammation at the joint level by blocking EP4. Collagen helps to recruit glucosamine and collagen type 2 to help to build up the cartilage. And collagen helps to recruit the ACAN and your chondroitin to help to cushion the joint. Now, what I recommend you do is take the collagen every day and do this exercise. Whatever joint pain that you have, open up the joint up to the point of pain and a little bit more. And count to 30 seconds and then release. And do that, let it rest, and then do that 3 times. Do that every day. And take the collagen, and what you will notice is that you'll be able to open up your joint more before you start getting pain, up to the point where the pain is gone. And what you're doing is, by doing this exercise, you're sending micro signals to the joint and telling your body, remodel. And so it's important to do this exercise. And the collagen is going to help with the remodeling. Now, I recommend that you stack it with the collagen, because the collagen has the building blocks to help to build up that cartilage and build up the cushioning of the joint. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the collagen, and get the collagen. You can take them separately, but I recommend that you take them together and do that exercise. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. And again, collagen is perfect for sports injuries and arthritis. All right, let's listen into Fox Business about Governor Hochul.
And to worse. All right, the Maine story keeps getting worse and worse. Democrats in Maine look like they're going from bad to worse. Let's talk about this story and a few others. Governor Hochul helping the Chinese. We welcome back Ben Domenech, Fox News contributor. Welcome back Ben Ferguson, host of the Ben Ferguson podcast. Thank you, gentlemen. Look, Troy Jackson for Graham Plattner sounds like a lousy trade. He's a big phony. But I just want to read a couple things here from think tank Common Sense for Maine. Maine, they ruined Maine. Maine leads the nation in child abuse rates. Maine's infrastructure ranks dead last. Maine's got the nation's largest increase in electricity rates, the highest property tax burden, zero job growth, 46th in ease of starting a business. Public education ranks 41st. I mean, they've wrecked a perfectly good state, Ben Dominich. Now they're trying to shove this Troy Jackson, who was a Republican conservative, and he's now some big liberal socialist. I don't get any of this.
I'm sorry, I don't want to depict Troy Jackson as being worse than Graham Plattner, because I think we know that Graham Plattner is almost certainly a worse person. So I don't want to go too far in this direction, Larry, if you'll forgive me. But when it comes to his ideology, the truth is this does not look like an upgrade in any way, sense, shape, or form. And look, we have talked about how this DSA appeal is based entirely on the belief that the American people have no memory, that they do not recall in any way the mistakes of the past that were made around the world when it came to embracing socialism, that they view this instead as some kind of nondescript and completely uplifting version of what happens in Nordic countries and the like. And that's a complete falsehood. That's not what these people believe. That's not what they're interested in. And they are very open about that fact. So look, when you listen to these people, and I think this is something that is really important in American politics, when you listen to the crazy things that these people say, believe them. It's what we heard from Kamala Harris back in the day when all the journalists came out and said, oh, there was no way that she was for, having state-funded, transitions for trans prisoners, what have you. And then, of course, they all got fact-checked, and it was like, no, actually, she said it, and she said it on camera and in writing and everything else. So the truth is, believe these people when they say these crazy things, because we have every indication that they do believe them. I think that Maine voters are going to reject this kind of thing. Yeah. They know the truth, and they know that Susan Collins has delivered for their state.
I mean, these Democrats have been running the state. They basically ruined a perfectly good state, Ben Ferguson.
Yeah, an amazing state.
I mean, it used to be a good state. It used to be a healthy state, and it no longer is.
Yeah. Well, look at the guy that now everyone is getting around. All you have to do is look at Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has now told you that the last guy who has had the Nazi tattoo and all the abuse of women was amazing. He's like, all right, I'm going to give you a redo. And now he picks next. Like, does anyone trust Bernie Sanders right now on any endorsement anywhere in the country? And if you are a voter in this state, you should look at what Bernie Sanders just gave you last time. And if he's telling you, wait, I've got you another one. Like, but wait, there's more. I mean, this guy's worse than a ShamWow guy. At least then you got something to mail from him. So I look at this and I sit there and I go, hey, you know what? If you want to trust Bernie Sanders, you're a special kind of stupid. I just got to say it, just to be honest.
Yeah, well, Susie Collins is going to win. She's going to win, for better or worse. Ben Dominich, let me raise another point. I want to come down to New York. Ha, ha, ha. Governor Hochul, okay, she is now voting for China. She wants a year ban on data centers, okay? This is like what she and Andrew Cuomo, remember him, did on fracking. Pennsylvania fracked and pipeline. It's a roaring economy. New York did neither. It's like the old East Berlin and West Berlin story. So here they go again, only it's data centers. And then just for the heck of it, millionaires, New York's millionaires are leaving. I never thought I'd see this. They're leaving. They're taking the tax base away from it. And guess what? They're going to Florida and Texas, Ben. So it's not just Maine, okay? Lightning has struck in New York once again.
The primary beneficiaries of this ridiculous statement and position from Governor Hochul are the neighbors of Ben Ferguson. They're all the people in red states who are going to benefit from the fact that this business is going to go flowing to states like Texas. It's going to go in directions that are going to actually benefit consumers. And look, you mentioned China at the outset of that. People need to understand that there's a campaign going on right now. It's a campaign that's very noticeable on social media. It is designed to foment opposition to these data centers and to the energy being used to support them in communities based on lies. And a lot of it is something that, look, I'm as much about communities being able to decide, to self-determine the way that they go forward. But when it comes to these blue states making a decision against these things, they are doing the bidding of communist China that does not want America to be in the lead when it comes to AI or when it comes to these data centers.
Communities should be able to make the decisions for themselves. But the truth is, red states are going to benefit gigantically from the fact that blue states are not going to accept these things.
And you know, Ben, these Democrats purport to help working people. They are not. These are jobs. These data centers, people, you know, welders, electricians, carpenters. There's so many jobs available for working class folks, okay, that may not have 3 advanced degrees from Bowdoin College or whatever. You get my point? This is exactly the opposite of what they claim.
Yeah, I almost don't want to tell the truth because I love all these people coming to Texas. But when you look at the governor of New York and you look at what she's telling the people there about these data centers, she's flat out lying to them. Like, we have a lot of them here in Texas. The lie they tell you, well, they're going to run out of natural resources and water. All these data centers are now built on a closed circuit water system. So they reuse the water over and over. They're not gushing in more water, taking from the community. Then they put out another lie and they say, well, the grid's going to go down, aka the power grid. Guess what? In Texas, when you build these now, it actually adds supply to the grid in that area. They build out and expand it so it's more reliable grid for the people in the community where these are being built. So look, if she wants to keep lying to the people of New York and sending all these amazing jobs to Texas, we will happily take them because they say for every one job that you have right directly with the data center, you have about 5 other jobs that are created because of all the aid and support and all the other things you mentioned. So for us, we're loving it. And if New York wants to screw themselves again on this one, knock yourself out.
East Berlin and West Berlin all over again.
Great analogy.
Ben Dominitz, thank you. Ben Ferguson, thank you. You're both spectacular. All right.
The probability of me understanding this is 0.
You should AI that with Copilot.
All right, let's listen to Fox about this significant escalation. U.S. deals major blow to IRGC. But before we do, the market for the S&P 500 is trading at 7,475, so it has creeped back up from the session open. Oil is trading at 80.74, and natural gas is trading at 2.896. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the vitamin D3. It's dual purpose. It's going to help with bone density. It's going to help with cardiovascular health. It boosts up your immune system. And it also helps with gene expression. It's a gene expression cofactor. Super important. To help with your pancreas and to digest your foods properly, get the digestive enzyme complex. This will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, reduce the load on your pancreas, and allow you to absorb your nutrients more efficiently. This has bromelain in it. It'll also help to break up clots, and it has the proteolytic enzymes to help break up glycoproteins. Super important during the cold season. And resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression, soaks up free radicals, helps the health of your mitochondria. It stacks really well with C60. Take the C60 and the resveratrol together to help the basal layer for your skin. And this helps to get rid of senescent cells. If you want to improve your youthful gene expression, take resveratrol every day. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description of this video.
Well, look at how bad they are behaving. It just proves the president's initial point for launching Operation Epic Fury in the first place. Iran can...
The U.S. striking dozens of Iranian military targets last night, bombing a key hub on the Strait of Hormuz. The major blow to the IRGC.
Plus, we're tracking major weather alerts across the country. Here's a live look at New York City. Just look at this morning. A wildfire smoke from Canada brings hazy skies to millions across the United States. Meanwhile, catastrophic flooding returns to Texas just 1 year after deadly flooding that hit Camp Mystic.
Plus, the CDC and FDA believe they've traced the source of that parasite outbreak. We're going to tell you the details, and can we eat salad again? Wouldn't that be nice?
I never stopped.
No. Lettuce is so dirty. It is so
Did I get accused of blowing the teasers? I sucked you in. It was a trick. Fox and Brain starts right now. Remember, Williams, better with friends. Get this.
So, sixth straight day, the United States hammering targets in Iran, and we're entering a new phase of the war as CENTCOM takes aim at bridges and resupply routes in or around key port cities along the Strait of Hormuz.
It is part of President Trump's strategy to pressure Iran to stop attacking ships and to engage in further peace talks.
So, Madeline Rivera is alive and watching too with the details. Maddie.
Hi, good morning, guys. That's right. This is significant escalation. The targeting of roads, bridges, and bases around the port city of Bandar Abbas is significant because it cuts off Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps supply routes, essentially isolating them. Bandar Abbas is key to controlling the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. has maintained their military action is aimed at degrading Iran's ability to attack commercial ships traveling through that critical waterway.
Well, look at how bad they are behaving. It just proves the president's initial point for launching Operation Ep58 in the first place. Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. After Operation Ep58, the conclusion of it, we did move forward into a diplomatic phase, if you will. But unfortunately, Iran has since violated that. They have expressed they still want to make a deal to the president. We're talking to them. But again, the president is not going to allow them to fire on ships in the Strait without paying a consequence for that.
So in response to these U.S. strikes,
according to these two investment legends who picked NVIDIA 10 years ago, Elon Musk is about to open America's last week.
So in response to these U.S. strikes, Iran launched missiles and drones targeting Qatar, Bahrain, and Jordan. It also damaged a power and water desalination plant in Kuwait, something crucial in the small desert nation. Iran state media is also reporting that Iran's energy minister is urging people to reduce their electricity consumption after attacks damaged energy infrastructure in and around Bandar Abbas. And remember, the president had warned earlier this week of strikes on Iran's bridges and power plants if it did not return to the negotiating table. Orange, Ainsley, and Brian.
All right, thanks so much, Maddie. So there's a method, and the method is we're going to physically open up the strait. And to do that, we're going to have to blow up the things that have been keeping the strait closed and threatening merchant ships. And we're shutting down roads, blowing up bridges as it relates to this. So we cannot trust you to negotiate for 60 days. So we tried that for 2 weeks. That's not going to work. So now we're physically going to do this. You have to be a little bit more patient. And if you want to know how effective we've been so far, think about the fact that they are now threatening us, saying we're going to activate the Houthi rebels to shut down the Red Sea, which is 7% of oil transfer, energy transfer, if you continue to do this. And so far, they also said if you blow up power plants, we'll do that too. And there is some activity in Yemen where the Houthis are located that shows they're prepared to do something. But keep in mind, remember the whole signal chat thing? That was in response to an offensive against the Houthis to stop them from shutting down the Red Sea. Do they remember that?
So we were told, Ainsley, initially that, when it came to the Houthis, that Israel was a problem, that Israel was going on their territory. I hope they get involved so we can eliminate them as well. All of these bad actors are all connected with Iran. There was some activity also in Kuwait as well. They're not just trying to hit our bases, but they're hitting our Gulf allies. I hope to see them get involved at some point. Here's your butter yesterday. Exactly. Here's Caroline Levitt.
The reason, and this is important for the American people to understand, the reason for the recent strikes over the course of the last several days is because Iran violated the Memorandum of Understanding that we struck with them. Specifically, in the Memorandum of Understanding that they signed, they were not to fire on commercial vessels moving through the Strait of Hormuz. And unfortunately, they have made the tragic decision for them to do that. And President Trump is not going to sit by and allow these active acts of terrorism to take place in the Strait without ensuring Iran pays consequences for that, and that's what we are witnessing right now.
So she's saying this is the punishment for violating the MOU. You want to tell us about this map, Brian?
So here's the Bandar Abbas area where they're launching a lot of their drones and rockets from. So we said, okay, we know exactly where it's coming from. We've been watching. We got eyes in the sky. So we've been taking that out, blowing that up. And they have not shot at one ship in 3 days now. Now, the question is, can we get the merchant ships to go through knowing they got insurance? Because right now there's been 13 on Wednesday. I didn't see the numbers on Thursday. but we got to get that number up to 50. 25 tankers at least, and then various other fertilizer and natural gas, whatever it takes. We got to get that number up at least 25 to 50 for the price of oil to go back down, because now it's got, they say gas right now is $3.85. And a barrel of oil is $84. We need it around 70.
Well, we have hit 2,000 targets in the last few days along Iran's state-run electrical grid. That's putting a strain on the country's power grid. In addition, we have also expanded our airstrike campaign by increasingly hitting these bridges. And what do you guys make of the Houthis possibly being involved in this? Because Iran has asked the Houthi terrorists, as we've been talking about this morning, to prepare to close a critical part of the Red Sea, this gateway called Bab el-Mandab Strait, if the U.S. attacks Iran's power infrastructure.
It's kind of like what I was alluding to earlier, and Brian, I don't know if you agree. I wish they would get involved so we can stop pretending that they haven't been involved to begin with. It's all Iran. Now, of course, they focus most of their firepower on Israel, but this is the same organization. Whether you're talking about Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, all of it leads to Iran. So let's put them all on the level playing field. Let's use our military, and let's get Israel back in the game. Now, they've been delayed because they understand with the president, they understand the political climate, and they've listened to the president and been hands off. But, we talk about munitions and what we need. Let them get back in the game. They want to be in this fight as well. It's their health and safety that's on the line as well.
They said if you rocket us, we're going back in. We're not going to ask the U.S. for permission. I agree. The Houthi rebels, if you rocket Israel, they're going to bomb you out. We don't need a green light from us. They're not going to get it. They don't look for it. They wouldn't listen to it. But I'm not for the Houthis getting involved, because temporarily they're going to shut down additional oil. It could go to $150 a barrel. That would hurt everyone in the short term. Houthis are tough to hit. They're easy to hit, but tough to wipe out. Saudi Arabia tried it for 2 years, and they hit Saudi Arabia yesterday. So there's a risk of them expanding it. My sense is the Houthis' utter existence was jeopardized a year ago. Do they want to do that? Because they don't have the same relationship as Hezbollah and Hamas. It's a little bit more transactional with Iran and the Houthi rebels. So my feeling is, if they play that card, the Houthis, it would temporarily, at least for 2 weeks until we reopen it, cause more economic pain here.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now.
All right, so right now I have positions in longing and shorting natural gas, so I have a hedge strategy. I also have a hedge strategy where I'm longing and shorting oil, and I'm longing energy companies at the moment. All right, with that, let's go to Bloomberg. But before we do, please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Myotrol. This will help with building muscle and maintaining muscle. When you're older, it's harder to gain muscle because your gene expression is less. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with the gene expression to build muscle and to maintain it. So if you want to reduce atrophy, or what is called sarcopenia, but if you want to reduce atrophy, if you want to reduce the loss of muscle mass because of age, take Myotrol. Now, if you are an athlete, younger or older, you will also benefit from Myotrol. This will help to recover from your workout. It brings down inflammation and helps to build muscle. So get the Myotrol. You can stack this with the Gladiator Barley for added benefits to build muscle. Get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It has the vitamins and the minerals that you need to help slow down the aging process, so you can use this as your multivitamin. And it has a lot more supplements in here that will help to slow down the aging process. Now, it focuses on different systems. It helps with the cardiovascular system. It helps with the immune system and your endocrine system. It helps with brain function. It helps to build muscle. So it helps your musculature. Revs up your cellular metabolism and increases your energy levels, and you have a steady burn of energy throughout the whole day. You will feel the effects of this within 72 hours when you start taking it. And you'll have just more energy and more vitality. And by taking it every day, you will notice that you're slowing down this aging process. You're going to sleep better. You're going to be able to build muscle. This stacks well with the Mitrol if you want to do that. Boomer Boost also stacks really well with the barleys, either the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley. And I recommend to follow this protocol that I have that I do every day. Take the Boomer Boost, take the C60, the turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans, the Max 35, and the probiotics. That is the core to help slow down the aging process. Then you stack on top of that if you want to, like the omega-3s and the resveratrols, the clarity factors, the collagen. Depends on what you want to target and how much you want to spend in this whole anti-aging. But if you have a budget and you really can't afford a whole lot of supplementation, I highly recommend you getting the Boomer Boost. Now, if you are a sufferer of migraine headaches, you will most likely benefit from the Boomer Boost. What you'll notice is the severity of the headaches and the frequency of the headaches will drastically diminish. I've suffered from migraine headaches almost all my life, and going all the way back to maybe age 5 or 6 years old. And when I started taking the Boomer Boost, my migraine headaches radically went down. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
Like a tank, you can throw it across wherever, you can throw it in the pool. This thing is not going to break. It's a tank. At the same time, what you really need to understand is that Apple's mobile phone is going to be more durable than the competitive device.
Yeah. Okay, so we have around 1 minute left, and as Apple invests more in AI and new devices, do you think it can maintain its premium position? Because we also know that smartphone growth is slowing a little.
I think that Apple, if you look at it as a complete package, you look at the hardware, software, services, I still think they have the most competitive phone on the market on a global scale. I think it's the best combination of user accessibility, interface, services, things like iMessage. So I think it remains an elite product. And I don't think the phone is going away as quickly as some people do.
Mark, very briefly, Isabel asked about revenue. Whenever Apple earnings hit the Bloomberg, one of the first things I look at is China revenue. Speak to us about what is happening in terms of Apple and China. I know there was some news announced about the iPhone in China. What's going on there?
So Apple will finally be able to roll out its AI in China. This is the first generation version of its new AI, so the Apple Intelligence that got the head of AI fired. So I don't think this is a needle mover. I don't think people in China are going to want it. But the second generation, the new Siri AI, the new Apple Intelligence is pretty good. So we'll see how long it takes for that to get approved.
All right, we do have Apple shares right now trading lower. Almost since we began the conversation, Apple declined now by 0.3%. NVIDIA, by the way, lower by just about 1%. You're not saying anything. It's what the investors are saying, Mark Gurman. Thank you. So it's great having you in New York, by the way. Thank you so much for joining us, Isabel Lee. Short and sweet, but I loved it. Thank you so
Charlie.
much.
Always fun.
All right, coming up at 12:05 Wall Street time. Yes, we got Balance of Power. We'll have reaction to President Trump's speech last night. President Trump, by the way, accusing China of election meddling. But of course, we will have the very latest on the war in the Middle East and what it means for politics, inflation, and energy. Also, don't forget that for our listeners in the U.S., you can tune in to listen to us on satellite radio on Sirius XM Channel 121. Business headlines, top world news coming up right now.
Let's just listen into the Transportation Secretary, Duffy.
The size and configuration is very similar to what's been built over the course of these five ships. Missile Defense Agency, same ship, reconfigured for a different purpose and mission set, but ultimately one that is capitalizing on this line being high. And again, that's another part of our strategy, is looking for where we can use current ship designs where we already have expertise and move forward. Correct. And I would just say that's a lot of the leadership was
There's a lot of background noise in that video. It's a live feed. They're talking about how they are increasing shipbuilding in the United States. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Renew, or the Renew is the quick dispenser of the structural nano silver, or the tube version that I have, the structural nano silver gels. They're dual purpose. You can use it as a daily skincare. You can put it on a cut and it'll help to heal the cut quicker. And during the cold season or the allergy season, put it on your hands, lightly coat your nostrils, so stay active for 5.5 hours. Now, I recommend for individuals that are going through the fire smoke issue across the United States, take the structural nano silver gel and lightly coat your nostrils. Also use the Max 35 or cleanse and gargle about 20-30 seconds and then swallow it. This is going to help to protect your oral pharynx. The gel in your nose, lightly coated, will help to capture some of the particulate matter. This particulate matter from the fires will cause problems with your oral pharynx. Super important to protect your oral pharynx. Another way to protect your oral pharynx is use my structural nano silver lozenges, and that will create the secretions to protect the oral pharynx. Now, you also have to worry about these dust particles can cause pulmonary problems, lung issues, breathing issues, and also cause some problems with your cardiac function. If it's chronic and you're breathing in this stuff regularly, it's going to perturb the actual lining between your alveoli and the blood vessels around the alveoli, and this particulate matter and inflammatory cytokines and toxins are going to get into the bloodstream and cause problems, including dilating and creating a leaky blood-brain barrier. So in environments like this that are chronic, if you're chronically breathing in these types of particulate matter, you're going to have pulmonary problems, potentially, cardiac problems, potentially, and also problems with brain function. So please, stay away from the particulate matter, stay indoors, and there are ways to mitigate, such as using the lozenges, using the Max 35, and coating your nostrils with the structural nano silver gel. It's really important. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com.
For the current admin, not really talked about too much in the press, but is one thing that they kind of set out to be a major goal for the administration when President Trump got back into office. He actually picked his first Secretary of the Navy with the thought of specifically addressing the issue of shipbuilding, especially in the United States military. All right, we do have some breaking news to get to here on Live Now from Fox. There has been reports of a magnitude 7.4 earthquake hitting the Mexican coast near Guatemala and triggering a tsunami threat. Let's go ahead and pull this up from Fox News, saying breaking. A powerful 7.4 magnitude earthquake struck off the Mexican Pacific coast. The quake hit about 40 miles from the major port city of Puerto Madero near the Guatemala border. The powerful tremor prompted a tsunami warning and was felt across parts of Central America. And they are reporting on this on their programming as we are right now. Let's go ahead and pull up this map to give you an idea of where this is. South of Mexico, kind of heading towards the Guatemala coast, pretty much encompassing much of Central America. So a big portion of Central America right now is now going to be under a tsunami threat for the foreseeable future. So it's something to keep in mind. If you have family members down there, you might want to get in touch with them, make sure that they are okay. And we have this from Reuters here. Go ahead and read some of this off, saying powerful.
Now, what is interesting here, not to go too much on a tangent in this show because it's almost completed, but just recently there were earthquakes in Venezuela. There were earthquakes in Japan. Now you have it in Mexico, off the coast of Mexico. The big one's coming for California. It's coming. Now, it doesn't mean tomorrow, but in our lifetime, we will probably see the big one for California. With that said, we are moving towards an era starting 9/11 of this year and lasting for approximately 2 years, where Bad things are going to happen. And it's going to affect many aspects of your life. Health, the economy, geopolitical problems, instability in the world, crop yields, wild temperature swings, areas having droughts, other areas having flooding. You're going to start seeing things are going to be moving in a very kinetic and very volatile way. Things are going to be chaotic. Now, it's tied to this idea that's been around for thousands of years, so I'm not making this up. But when Rosh Hashanah coincides with the Sabbath, it's bad. But when you have 2 consecutive years where that happens, in most cases, really bad things happen in the world. So pay attention. I personally believe that the United States is being tested. It's being tested on 2 fronts, domestically and internationally. On the international front, we, as a country, must destroy Iran. If we don't, we will be cursed. Domestically, we are in a battle between socialism and capitalism. And if we fail to fight against socialism, we will lose our constitutional freedoms. Those are the those are the 2 things that Americans need to really focus on. But the Israelis also have a problem. The Israelis in the 1960s debated, the scholars debated, and the state heads debated if a Sanhedrin was going to be created. The reason why the red heifer was not sacrificed ritually, going through a ritual slaughtering to create the ashes, to purify the people and purify the objects to rebuild the temple, is because the Sanhedrin wasn't created in the 1960s. That the Sanhedrin had to be it has to be reconstituted to allow for this to happen. This is the reason why. Now, the red heifers, I believe originally there were 5, now there's maybe 2 or 3 that are still pure enough to do, but that's going to go away. The last time we had red heifers was 2,000 years ago. Israel will be cursed because the internal politics between the liberals and the orthodoxy could not come together to reconstitute the Sanhedrin. And what was supposed to happen was that in the 1960s, the Sanhedrin was supposed to be reconstituted, and the red heifers that are presented today that happened to pop up during a major crisis. We remember the crisis of 2020. They were supposed to slaughter, they were supposed to ritually slaughter those animals, burn them, and use the ashes for purification. Because Israel failed, Israel will be cursed. But that doesn't mean that the Muslims will be not cursed. There's going to be absolute destruction of that region. Because we couldn't get to a point where Esau was eliminated because of fear. Now, Trump will be cursed, and a lot of bad things are going to happen to Trump because he failed to finish the job. Now, it is possible, but very unlikely, that Trump finishes the job in Iran before 9/11 of 2026. And it is possible that Israel will reconstitute the Sanhedrin, but highly unlikely. And therefore, the curse is coming. And so you're going to start hearing a lot of bad things. Tectonic shifts, crop yields, pandemics, endemic problems. You're already hearing it now. The cyclospora and Ebola and all these things are happening. War. We're already in World War III. It's a different type of war now. It's not like World War II. It's not the Cold War. It's something different. Because of smart technology, smart bombs, AI, drones, it's a different kind of war. But we're in World War III. And it could get worse. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that as it gets worse, that there will be a draft in the United States. Because we failed to do the right thing when we needed to. Just like how Israel failed to do the right thing when they were supposed to in 1960s to reconstitute the St. Andrew. There's still time. Things could change by now to 9/11. But right when 9/11 happens, that's at sundown. The shofar can't be blown because it coincides with the Sabbath. And you can't silence Satan or what other people call Satan. And when you don't do that, your sins can't be absolved for the year. And a blessing can't be provided. And it's going to happen for the world because this blessing is for the whole world, not just Jews. And when this happens, bad things are going to happen. Bad things are going to start to emerge. I wouldn't be surprised that a major meltdown of the economy happens during this time period. And further escalation of war and instability. You feel stable. You feel confident that things are okay because you're living in the United States. Well, how much does it take to actually put you into complete fear? Fear for your life, fear for your health, fear for what you've saved, fear for anything that you've accumulated monetarily. It doesn't take much. Doesn't take much.
Many of them released last night were either heavily redacted, appeared to be incomplete, or contained information that was already known. But there's a few different points of context that we know about the timing of the president's remarks here, including that he made a big push for that Save America Act, that voter ID law that he would like to see enacted.
Is that what this is really all about? Is it greasing the skids for Save America?
Maybe, although it doesn't really feel like there's appetite on Capitol Hill to get it done. The numbers aren't there. It doesn't seem like we're going to get it over the finish line unless maybe somehow some provisions could be stripped out and put in a reconciliation package. Senator McCormick told me that earlier this week that he would be in favor of such a move. The other, though, context is the allegations against China, which has denied them. They called them completely fabricated in a statement earlier today. But to the point that you made at the top of the program, this is coming just weeks ahead of an expected visit here in Washington.
When's he coming? Do we have a date?
September 24th, I think, is what the White House said, because that is the same week as the United Nations General Assembly. Like a lot of these visits, though, China hasn't confirmed that. We've seen what this White House, the Trump administration often confirms before China. China likes to wait until the last minute. I mean, even when we saw President Trump go to Beijing earlier this year, China didn't confirm it until like a day before it happened. But President Trump's comments stopped short of proposing any sort of concrete action against China in response to these allegations, which raises the question as to, what the motive may be. Is this posturing or leverage ahead of that visit? Things like that we heard a lot of talk about, because I think it's fair to say that relations have been relatively stable since that visit, but tensions have been creeping in, whether that is about trade, whether that is about technology and AI and competition in that sphere, So a lot to keep our eyes on.
Sort of ironic that it looks and smells like Beijing outside today in Washington, right? That's kind of like every other Friday for them with the smoke and no masks though, like I said. The fact of the matter is, the president called out his own intelligence agencies, right? This happened on his watch in the first term. CIA Director John Ratcliffe was his DNI. How do we rationalize all of that? Were they lying to him or keeping information away from him?
I don't know the answer to that, but we'll see how it evolves. I will point out, and to this point, a 2021 report by the U.S. intel community concluded that there was no indications of any foreign actor attempting to alter any sort of technical aspect of the voting process in the 2020 election. So these are claims that had previously been debunked. I will point out, though, and we also heard that statement, you mentioned it the other day from Jim Himes, we heard from Mark Warner on Senate Intel. There had been a push when it comes to bipartisanship for China infiltrating U.S. infrastructure and cyber attacks, things like that, but not related to the election. And you're seeing officials in Washington today draw that distinction between election security or broader U.S. security related to some of our critical defenses.
We should also note the difference between interference and influence, right? It's one thing to be putting up dummy ads on Facebook. It's another thing to be getting into machines and changing votes. Fascinating color from inside the room. You won't hear this anywhere else. This came from our TV pool reporter who was in the room in the East Room last night. Ready? When it was all over, because he had a crowd with him. The cabinet was in there, broke into applause after the cameras turned off. And get this. I'm reading directly from the pool note. The president joked with the crowd and spoke to the audience about election fraud and other topics for another 20 minutes. He was only halfway done when the speech ended. Fascinating stuff. In the room, Navarro, Mullen, McMahon, Cottrell, Pulte. Hey, thanks, Tyler. Look at that thing. Get on YouTube. We can't.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nanosilver toothpaste. This has the structural nanosilver that helped to neutralize. It'll whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce inflammation, help the health of your gum line. And with good oral hygiene, you're also helping your cardiovascular health and valvular health. This has no fluoride. Use it every day, especially during the cold season. But use it every day. It's a very high quality toothpaste. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get a few tubes of this for your household. And again, use it every day. That's the end of my broadcast. Please help support the work that I do by sharing the links, asking your social media to follow me. Make sure you hit the like button. You can follow me on YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble. You can also watch on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the great products that I offer. These are products that I take every day to help slow down the aging process. It works, it's affordable, it's very effective. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. It's a tongue twister. The link is in the description of this video and all my videos. Thank you for listening, and have a nice day.